The sun rose slowly over the quiet streets of Atlanta, painting everything in shades of gold. The air was still cool, and the city had that calm, sleepy sound that comes just before the world wakes up. Birds were singing in the trees, and a soft wind moved through the leaves. Inside a small brick house on the corner of Oakwood Drive, Marcus Hill was tying his shoes and checking the time on his old wristwatch. It looked like a normal morning. Nothing about it felt special. Marcus had just come back home after many years of serving his country as part of the Delta Force, the most elite special operations unit in the U.S. Army. He had been through deserts, mountains, and war zones, but now he was finally home, surrounded by peace. He missed peace. He wanted quiet mornings like this, with coffee and the sound of birds instead of gunfire. Marcus's father, Robert Hill, was already sitting at the kitchen table reading the newspaper. He was proud of his son, but worried too. War changes people. Sometimes they come back different, and Robert could see that Marcus was still learning to live like an ordinary man again. "Going to see Aunt Lydia today?" Robert asked without looking up from the paper. Marcus smiled. "Yeah. She called last night, said she made sweet potato pie and won't let me off the hook unless I show up." Robert laughed softly. "She misses you, son. We all did." Marcus poured himself a cup of coffee, sat across from his father, and looked out the window. Children were walking to the bus stop laughing and running. The world seemed safe again. He felt grateful for that. After breakfast, he grabbed the keys to his father's old gray sedan. It wasn't much to look at, but it ran smoothly. Robert had kept it in perfect condition. Marcus offered to take his father's car because his own truck needed servicing. He didn't think much about it. To him, it was just another quiet drive across town. He put on a simple black hoodie, jeans, and a baseball cap. Nothing fancy, nothing that stood out. He never liked attention. As he stepped outside, he felt the warm sunlight touch his face. It was one of those peaceful moments that make you feel like life is simple again. He breathed deeply and smiled. Another good day, he thought. Driving through the neighborhood, Marcus noticed how little things had changed. The same corner store where he used to buy sodas as a kid was still there. The same old man still sat on his porch, waving to people passing by. It made him feel at home. At a red light, Marcus tapped the steering wheel to the rhythm of an old blues song playing on the radio. The tune reminded him of long drives with his father, when life was easier and safer. He thought about how lucky he was to make it home alive when so many of his brothers in arms hadn't. He remembered the faces of men who had stood beside him in faraway lands, the ones who had risked everything. He remembered the promises they made to each other. If we make it home, we live with purpose. That thought guided him every day. As he turned onto the main road, the morning sun was higher now, making the streets shimmer. Cars passed by. Joggers ran down the sidewalks. The world seemed perfectly ordinary. Marcus relaxed, one hand on the wheel, the other resting on the window. He thought about what he would say to Aunt Lydia. Maybe he would tell her about his time overseas, or maybe not. Some stories were too heavy to share. He just wanted to sit at her table, eat pie, and laugh like nothing bad ever happened. His phone buzzed with a message, his father reminding him to pick up milk on the way back. Marcus smiled again. Simple things like that made him happy. After years of missions, orders, and danger, this was what he fought for. Ordinary mornings, family, peace. The radio host began talking about local news, traffic, and weather. Marcus listened casually, not paying much attention. He didn't notice the police cruiser that had just pulled onto the same street behind him. He didn't see the officers watching him closely, whispering to each other about a gray sedan that matched a report. For Marcus, it was still just another calm morning. He was thinking about his aunt's laughter, the smell of her kitchen, the taste of her pie. He was thinking about how good it felt to drive without a destination full of danger. He had no idea that within the next few minutes, this peaceful morning would take a sharp turn. No idea that the same discipline and training that once kept him alive in war would soon be tested again, right here, in his own country, on an ordinary street. The traffic light turned green, and Marcus drove forward, humming softly to the radio. He looked calm, confident, and strong. He didn't know that 2 police officers in the cruiser behind him were already calling in his license plate, their suspicion rising for reasons even they couldn't fully explain. The world outside still looked calm, but fate was quietly preparing something unexpected. Marcus was about to face a moment that would test everything he had learned about patience, control, and humanity. The morning that began so peacefully was only the calm before a storm, one that would shake the entire neighborhood, make headlines across the nation, and show the true strength of a man who had already fought too many battles to lose himself to anger now. He drove on, unaware that his life was about to change forever. The road ahead stretched long and quiet, sunlight flashing through the trees as Marcus drove down the familiar street. He was lost in thought, his mind far from the noise of the world. To him, it was just another drive through his hometown, but behind him a black and white police cruiser was following, its tinted windows hiding 2 officers watching his every move. Inside the cruiser, Officer Daniels, a man in his mid-30s, with a sharp jawline and a reputation for being by the book, sat behind the wheel. His partner, Officer Reed, younger and less experienced, was in the passenger seat, glancing at the gray sedan in front of them. "That car matches the report," Daniels said quietly. Reed frowned. "You sure? Looks like an old family car." Daniels shrugged. "Plates are similar. Let's check it out." Neither of them knew the man driving was a war hero, a Delta Force commander who had survived some of the world's most dangerous missions. To them, he was just another driver in a quiet neighborhood. Marcus, unaware of the growing suspicion behind him, turned up the radio slightly. The song playing was one his unit used to listen to before missions. It brought a bittersweet smile to his face. A moment later, flashing red and blue lights filled his rearview mirror. Marcus blinked, surprised. He looked around, checking if maybe they were after someone else. But no, the lights were meant for him. He calmly slowed down and pulled over to the side of the road. Years of training had taught him one thing above all: never react with emotion in tense moments. Control was everything. He turned off the engine, placed both hands on the steering wheel, and waited. Inside the cruiser, Officer Reed adjusted his body cam. Daniels spoke into his radio. "Dispatch, this is Unit 14. We're conducting a stop on a gray sedan, license plate Bravo X-ray 237. The dispatcher's voice crackled back. "Copy that, Unit 14. Both officers stepped out. The sound of their boots on the pavement echoed sharply. Marcus watched them in the mirror. Calm eyes, steady breathing. He had faced men with guns before, but this felt heavier somehow. It wasn't the weapons that worried him. It was the misunderstanding. "License and registration," Daniels said firmly as he approached the driver's window. Marcus rolled the window down slowly, his hands always visible. "Sure thing, officer. My license is in my back pocket." "Keep your hands where I can see them," Daniels snapped, his tone suddenly sharper. Marcus paused. "Of course," he said softly. Reed circled the car, scanning the back seat through the window. "You live around here?" he asked. "Born and raised," Marcus replied. "Just visiting my aunt. Did I do something wrong?" Daniels leaned closer, eyes narrowing. "Car matches a vehicle reported earlier. Mind stepping out for a moment?" Marcus hesitated, not out of fear, just confusion. "Officer, I think you've got the wrong—" "Out of the car!" Daniels ordered again, his hand resting near his holster. Marcus knew the look in the man's eyes. It was the look of someone more tense than in control. Years in combat had taught Marcus to read people quickly. He knew fear when he saw it. Slowly, Marcus opened the door and stepped out. The ground felt warm beneath his boots. He raised his hands slightly, not wanting to alarm them. "Turn around," Reed said. "Hands on the car." Marcus did as told, his calm never breaking. "Officer, I'm just trying to cooperate. Please check my ID. It'll clear this up." But Reed had already reached for Marcus's arm. The grip was hard, unnecessary. Marcus's instincts flinched for a split second, his body trained for years to counter threats automatically, but he forced himself to stay still. Then it happened fast. Daniels grabbed Marcus's shoulder, Reed pushed from behind, and before he could speak again, Marcus was slammed hard onto the pavement. The impact was sharp, jarring, but he didn't fight back. "Stay down," Daniels shouted. Marcus's cheek pressed against the hot asphalt. He could feel the sting, the roughness. In another life, another place, this move would have triggered a survival reaction, but now he wasn't a soldier. He was a citizen trying to stay calm in his own hometown. "I'm not resisting," Marcus said steadily. His voice didn't shake. "Please, just check my ID." A woman across the street gasped. Someone pulled out a phone, recording. Reed patted Marcus down, his hands brushing the military tags under Marcus's hoodie. For a moment he froze, realizing he was touching something that didn't belong to an ordinary man. "What's this?" Reed muttered. Daniels didn't answer. He was too busy keeping his knee pressed into Marcus's back, breathing hard, adrenaline rushing. Marcus closed his eyes. He thought about his father, probably sipping his second cup of coffee right now. He thought about how easily fear could turn a peaceful morning into something ugly. "Please," he said again quietly. "My ID is in the right pocket." Reed finally reached in, pulled out the wallet, and looked at the badge inside. His eyes widened. "Daniels, you might want to see this." Daniels frowned, snatched the ID, and then his face changed. His voice went flat. "This can't be right," he whispered. "Delta Force. Commander Marcus Hill?" Reed stepped back, stunned. "Sir, we didn't—" Marcus, still on the ground, opened his eyes. "Now you know," he said calmly. "So can I get up?" Silence filled the air. Even the birds seemed to have stopped singing. For the first time, Daniels realized the weight of what they had done, not just to a man, but to someone who had dedicated his life to protecting the very freedom they represented. And though Marcus said nothing more, the look in his eyes said everything. The street was silent. Even the sound of cars passing by seemed distant now. Officer Daniels froze, holding Marcus's ID card in his trembling hand. The name, the rank, the commendations, it was all there in black and white. Commander Marcus Hill, United States Delta Force. For a moment, Daniels didn't know what to say. Reed stood beside him, wide-eyed and speechless. The reality of who was lying on that pavement hit them like a cold wave. They had just forced to the ground one of the most elite soldiers in American history, a man who had spent years risking his life for the same country they swore to serve. Marcus didn't move. His breathing was steady, his eyes fixed on the small patch of concrete in front of him. His hands were still behind his back, not resisting, not struggling. He could have turned the situation around in seconds if he wanted to. His training made him capable of that. But he chose not to. Control was strength. Restraint was power. Finally, Daniels spoke. "Get him up," he said quietly. Reed hesitated. "Sir, should we—" "Get him up," Daniels repeated, softer this time, as if ashamed. They lifted Marcus carefully. He brushed the dust from his hoodie, not saying a word. His calmness made the officers even more uneasy. There was no anger, no yelling, just silence, the kind that makes people feel small. Daniels tried to speak again, his voice shaking. "Sir, we didn't know." The vehicle, there was a report. Marcus looked at him steadily. "You didn't ask. You assumed." That one sentence cut deeper than anything else could have. Daniels lowered his eyes. Reed swallowed hard, feeling guilt knot in his stomach. Marcus took back his ID, his movements slow and deliberate. He glanced at the badge number on Daniels' uniform, then at Reed's. "You wear that badge," he said softly. "To protect, not to fear." Reed opened his mouth to explain, but no words came out. The woman across the street was still recording. A few more people had stopped to watch. The weight of public eyes added another layer of pressure. Marcus turned toward his car. "Can I go now?" Daniels nodded quickly. "Yes, sir." "Of course, we're sorry about this." But Marcus didn't move yet. He looked down at the small scrape on his hand from the fall. The skin was torn, bleeding slightly, but he ignored it. He'd had worse. What hurt wasn't the wound, it was the reminder. The reminder that even in the country he had fought for, he still had to prove he was not a threat. He finally spoke again, this time quieter. "Do you know what discipline means, officer?" Daniels looked up, unsure how to answer. It means standing in chaos and not losing yourself, Marcus continued. You thought control meant force. It doesn't, it means patience. Reed's face turned red. He couldn't look Marcus in the eye. Daniels nodded slowly, guilt written all over his face. You're right, sir. We handled this wrong. Marcus gave a faint nod and walked toward his car. His steps were calm, measured, each one heavy with emotion he refused to show. When he opened the door, he paused for a moment and looked back. Next time, he said, ask questions before you use power. It'll save lives. The words stayed in the air long after he drove away. Daniels and Reed stood in silence, the flashing lights still blinking uselessly in the daylight. They felt exposed, not because people were watching, but because they had seen the truth in Marcus's calm eyes. Back in his car, Marcus gripped the steering wheel tightly. His heart wasn't racing, but something inside him ached. He had faced enemies overseas, men who looked him in the eye before trying to kill him. But this was different. This was his own home, his own soil. He looked into the rearview mirror one last time and saw the two officers still standing there, their faces pale. He could see confusion, regret, and maybe even shame. But he also hoped they had learned something, that the uniform doesn't give anyone the right to judge a man before knowing him. The drive after that was quiet. The radio still played softly, but Marcus didn't hear the music. His thoughts were louder. He thought about his father, about how to tell him what had just happened without making him worry. He thought about all the other men and women who didn't get the chance to explain themselves before someone decided who they were. As the city blurred past his window, Marcus made himself a silent promise. He would not let anger define him. He had lived through too much, seen too much to let bitterness win now. He didn't know it yet, but someone had already posted the video online. The world was about to see the man who chose calm over rage, peace over pride. Marcus drove on, the sunlight fading behind the clouds. What began as an ordinary morning had become a moment that would soon echo far beyond that quiet street. A story of discipline, dignity, and what true strength really looks like. The sound of Marcus's car slowly faded as he drove away, leaving behind a silence that felt heavier than the air itself. The two officers stood still on the side of the road, unsure of what to do next. The flashing police lights reflected off their faces, making the moment look almost unreal. Officer Daniels still held the small notepad he used during traffic stops, but his hand was shaking. He had been through hundreds of stops before, but this one would stay with him forever. Reed looked at the ground, avoiding eye contact, the guilt sitting deep in his chest. Did that really say Delta Force? Reed finally asked. Daniels nodded slowly. Not just Delta Force, Commander. A real one. I saw his credentials. Reed rubbed the back of his neck. I can't believe we did that. We just slammed a war hero onto the ground. Daniels didn't answer. His mind was replaying everything. The calm way Marcus had spoken, the control in his voice, the way he never raised his hands or his tone. That kind of discipline wasn't something you learned in police training. That was something deeper, something earned through pain, loss, and experience. Across the street, the woman who recorded the whole thing was still standing there, phone in hand. You guys messed up, she said quietly, not angry, just disappointed. That man didn't even flinch. He was calmer than both of you. Daniels didn't argue. He couldn't. He knew she was right. Minutes later, the police radio crackled. Unit 14 report status. Daniels pressed the button. Be situation clear. False match. Driver released. There was a pause. Copy that, Unit 14. He sat back in the cruiser, staring blankly through the windshield. His reflection in the glass looked older somehow, more tired. He finally muttered, "We need to file this report before it turns into something bigger." But it was already too late. A few miles away, Marcus parked his car outside his Aunt Lydia's house. The neighborhood was quiet, children playing in the front yards, neighbors chatting near fences. It was everything he had missed while being away. But today it felt different. He sat in the car for a long moment before getting out. His hand still stung from the scrape. He looked at it for a while, watching a tiny drop of blood roll down his palm. It wasn't the pain that made him pause. It was what it represented. He took a deep breath and whispered to himself, "Control, Marcus. Always control." When he finally stepped out, Aunt Lydia was already on the porch, smiling wide. "There you are, baby. I was about to call your daddy and tell him you forgot about me." Marcus forced a smile and hugged her tightly. Couldn't do that, Auntie. You promised me pie. She laughed, but when she pulled back, she noticed the dirt on his sleeve and the small scrape on his hand. What happened to you? Just a little misunderstanding, Marcus said softly. Nothing serious. She looked at him closely but didn't press. She knew the look in his eyes, quiet, controlled, heavy. She'd seen it before in his father after long days at the factory. Inside the kitchen, the smell of sweet potato pie filled the air. Marcus sat at the table trying to relax, but his thoughts kept drifting back to the moment on the street. The shouting, the fear, the feeling of asphalt against his face. Not because it hurt, but because it reminded him of something he'd fought his whole life to escape. Being seen as a threat before being seen as a man. Meanwhile, back at the station, Daniels was typing up the report. The more he wrote, the worse he felt. Suspect was cooperative, he typed, then stopped. No, not suspect. Civilian, he corrected himself. Civilian was cooperative. Reed leaned over his shoulder. You think this will stay quiet? Daniels sighed. Not a chance. Someone recorded it. You know how fast things spread these days? And he was right. Within an hour, the video began circulating online. The title read, Cops slam man to ground, then realize he's a Delta Force commander. At first, people thought it was fake. But then someone who recognized Marcus's name from military forums confirmed it was real. Comments flooded in, some angry, some heartbroken, and others amazed at how calm Marcus had been. By evening, news outlets were already calling it the Calm Commander Incident. Marcus's father saw it on the evening news before Marcus even made it home. Robert's face tightened as he watched the footage, his son on the ground, surrounded by officers who didn't know they were handling a man who had once led missions that saved hundreds of lives. When Marcus finally walked through the door that night, Robert didn't yell or ask questions. He just looked at his son and said quietly, You okay? Marcus nodded. Yeah, Dad, I'm fine. But his father could see the truth in his eyes. Fine didn't mean okay. It meant contained. It meant calm on the outside, storm on the inside. As the night went on, Marcus sat alone on the porch watching the stars. The city lights glowed in the distance. He thought about how easily peace could turn into chaos and how often people let fear lead them instead of understanding. He didn't know yet that the world was watching, that millions of people would soon know his name, not as a soldier, but as a symbol of calm strength and silent dignity. The revelation had begun, not just for the officers or for Marcus, but for everyone who would see the video and realize how one man's control could expose a nation's lack of it. The next morning, everything had changed. Marcus woke up early like he always did. The world outside was quiet, but his phone wasn't. It kept buzzing, messages, calls, notifications, all from numbers he didn't recognize. He didn't know it yet, but his name had already spread across the internet overnight. The video of the traffic stop was everywhere. Twitter, YouTube, Facebook, and every news channel that thrived on stories that shook people awake. At first, Marcus ignored the noise. He brewed a cup of coffee, sat by the window, and watched the sunrise. The sky looked calm and steady, just like he wanted to be. But deep down he could feel a storm forming, not inside him but around him. His father, Robert, came into the room holding his phone. His face was pale. Son, he said, you've gone viral. Marcus looked up. What do you mean? Robert placed the phone on the table and pressed play. The screen showed the moment. The flashing lights. Marcus stepping out of the car, his calm voice, the officers shouting, and then the slam. The video paused on Marcus's face, still, steady and unbroken. The caption read, They didn't know who they were dealing with. For a long moment, Marcus said nothing. He just watched himself on the screen like it was someone else. Everyone's talking about it, Robert continued. Some are angry, some are proud. Reporters want to talk to you. TV channels too. Marcus leaned back in his chair, eyes still on the frozen image. I didn't ask for this, he said quietly. I know, his father replied. But maybe it's meant to happen. Marcus wasn't sure what that meant. All he knew was that he never wanted fame. He'd spent most of his life in silence, serving in places the world didn't even know about. His work was supposed to be invisible, and now suddenly everyone wanted to see him. Outside, a car stopped by the house. A neighbor stepped out, phone in hand, waving. Marcus, you're all over the news, man. Marcus nodded politely, forcing a smile, but inside he felt uneasy. He didn't want to be seen as a hero or a victim. He wanted to be seen as a man, nothing more. Meanwhile, at the police station, Officer Daniels and Reed were sitting in a small office with their captain. The air was thick with tension. "You two realize what this has become?" the captain asked sternly. "Half the country's seen that video. The department's reputation is at stake." Daniels swallowed hard. "Sir, we made a mistake." "I know that." He didn't resist. He was respectful the whole time. The captain sighed heavily. "That man is a national hero. He's got military honors, classified missions, stuff most people will never even know about. You didn't just detain someone. You disrespected someone who spent years defending this country." Reed rubbed his forehead. "We didn't know, sir. We thought—" "That's the problem," the captain interrupted. "You thought. You didn't ask." The room went silent again. Across town, Marcus sat with his Aunt Lydia at the kitchen table. She had seen the video, too. She wasn't angry, but she was heartbroken. "Baby, you didn't deserve that," she said softly. Marcus shook his head. "It's not about what I deserve, Auntie. It's about what happens when people stop seeing each other as human." Her eyes filled with tears. "You handled it better than most could." He smiled faintly. "Training helps." But even his light joke couldn't hide the pain behind his calm. He had spent years learning to control fear, anger, and emotion under fire. But this wasn't a battlefield. It was home. By afternoon, news vans began to appear near his street. Reporters waited by the sidewalk hoping for a statement. Some shouted questions as he stepped outside to get the mail. "Mr. Hill, how did you stay so calm? Do you plan to sue the department? Are you angry about what happened?" Marcus looked at them for a moment, then said quietly, "No comment," but his silence spoke louder than any words could. Later that evening, he finally agreed to release a short written statement through a veterans organization. It said, "I am not angry. I am disappointed. I've seen conflict all over the world, but the hardest battles are the ones we fight at home, between fear and understanding. I stayed calm because someone has to. We can't fix what's broken by adding more anger to it." That statement went viral too. People shared it everywhere. Some called him a hero of peace. Others called him the definition of strength. The phrase "calm commander" began trending across social media. At the same time, people started demanding accountability from the police department. The officers involved were placed on temporary leave while an internal review began. For the first time, Daniels and Reed truly understood what Marcus had meant when he said, "Ask questions before you use power." That night, as Marcus sat alone in his living room, he turned off his phone. He didn't want to read the comments or watch the interviews. He just wanted quiet again, but deep down, he knew life would never be the same. The truth had surfaced, not just about who he was, but about something bigger. The world had seen how a single moment could reveal the difference between control and chaos, fear and understanding, weakness and strength. Marcus closed his eyes and whispered to himself, "If this is the way change begins, then let it begin." Outside, the night was still, but this time it didn't feel empty. It felt powerful, like the calm before a new kind of dawn. The morning after Marcus's statement went public, the world around him felt both louder and quieter at the same time. His phone wouldn't stop buzzing, yet his house was still heavy with thought. Reporters waited at the end of the street. Neighbors whispered outside, and people who had never spoken to him before suddenly wanted to shake his hand. But Marcus wasn't looking for attention. He wasn't looking for praise. He just wanted to breathe. He sat on the porch with a cup of black coffee, watching the mist rise from the grass. His father joined him quietly, carrying 2 folded newspapers. On both front pages was the same photo. Marcus kneeling on the ground, the police officers frozen above him, and that calm, unshaken look on his face. The headline read, "The Calm Commander, a soldier's discipline exposes a nation's fear." Robert handed him one of the papers. "You made history, son," he said softly. Marcus looked at the image for a long time. His face didn't show pride, just reflection. "I didn't want to," he replied. "I just wanted to drive to Aunt Lydia's." His father nodded slowly. That's how history usually starts, by accident. Meanwhile, across the city, the police department held a press conference. Cameras flashed as the chief stood behind the podium. Daniels and Reed sat behind him, their faces pale, nervous, and regretful. The chief spoke carefully. "The department recognizes the incident involving Commander Marcus Hill. We deeply regret how it was handled. The officers involved are under review and will undergo further training. We have reached out to Commander Hill personally to issue a formal apology." Daniel stared at the floor. Reed's hands were clasped tightly together. Neither man spoke, but the guilt was visible, heavy as a shadow. That afternoon, Marcus received a call from the police chief himself. The voice on the other end was polite but uneasy. "Mr. Hill, we want to apologize directly. What happened does not reflect who we strive to be." Marcus listened quietly. "Then make sure it never happens again," he said simply. "Not to anyone." The chief hesitated, then replied, "We'd like to meet if you're open to it." Marcus agreed, but not for revenge, and not for show. He didn't want to humiliate anyone. He wanted to understand how a system could lose sight of humanity so easily. When he arrived at the precinct, reporters lined the steps, flashing cameras like lightning. Marcus ignored them and walked in wearing the same calm expression he had worn the day before. Daniels and Reed were waiting inside, standing stiffly near the chief's desk. For a moment, no one spoke. Then Daniels stepped forward. "Sir," he began quietly, "I don't have an excuse. I judged before I understood. You had every right to be angry, but you weren't. I don't think I'll ever forget that." Marcus looked at him steadily. "Anger's easy," he said. "Understanding takes work," Reed nodded. "We're sorry, sir, truly." Marcus studied them both for a long moment before replying, "Then prove it. Change how you see people. That's how you make this right." There was no handshake, no dramatic ending, just truth, simple and real. After the meeting, Marcus walked outside into the sunlight. The cameras surrounded him again, microphones pushing toward his face. "Commander Hill, how do you feel after the apology?" a reporter shouted. He paused, then said, "I'm not here for revenge. I'm here for respect, something we should all give before we take judgment." Then he walked past the crowd, calm as ever. That night, Marcus sat alone in his room. The world saw him as a hero now, but inside he didn't feel like one. He was just tired. Tired of how quickly peace turned into fear. Tired of seeing people forget that patience could save lives. Still, something in him had shifted. He realized this moment wasn't just about him. It was about what came next. Later, his phone buzzed again, this time from a private number. It was a message from a police training academy in Virginia. "Commander Hill, we've seen your story. We'd be honored if you could visit and speak to our recruits about control under pressure." Marcus read it twice, then smiled faintly. Maybe this was how real change began, not in protests or shouting, but in teaching. He replied simply, "Tell me when and where." Outside, the night air was calm. Crickets sang in the distance. The same calm that once protected him in combat now surrounded him again. But this time it wasn't about survival. It was about purpose. Marcus leaned back on his porch chair and whispered to himself, "If peace is a weapon, then I'll use it." The world had seen his strength in silence, but soon they would hear his voice. And for the first time since that morning on Oakwood Drive, Marcus felt something deep and quiet inside him. Hope. By the end of the week, Marcus Hill's name wasn't just known in his city, it was known everywhere. What started as a shaky phone video filmed on a quiet street had turned into one of the most shared clips on the internet. Millions had watched it, replayed it, and argued about it. But no matter who they were or where they lived, almost everyone agreed on one thing. The man in the video had shown the world what real control looked like. News channels replayed the scene over and over. The moment Marcus was slammed to the ground, his voice calm and steady, his refusal to fight back even when he had every reason to. Some called it the calm herd around the world. Others said it was the lesson America didn't know it needed. Marcus, however, didn't watch any of it. He spent most of his days avoiding screens. He took long walks around the neighborhood, sometimes visiting his father, sometimes just sitting quietly in the park. He liked hearing birds instead of headlines, but even then people recognized him. A little boy once stopped him near the corner store and said, "You're that soldier from the video, right?" "My mom said you're brave." Marcus smiled softly. "Being brave doesn't always mean fighting," he said. "Sometimes it means staying calm." The boy grinned and ran back to his mother, who mouthed a silent, "Thank you." Moments like that touched Marcus more than any news story ever could. He didn't need awards or speeches. He wanted people to learn something, Not about him, but about themselves. Across the country, schools started showing the video in ethics and civics classes. Police departments began using it during officer training, calling it the Hill example. Even soldiers overseas wrote messages to him online, thanking him for reminding them that strength isn't measured by aggression but by restraint. His inbox filled with hundreds of letters, some from veterans, some from ordinary people. One message stood out. "I was there that day, a few cars back. I wanted to shout to help, but I froze. Watching how you handled it changed me. You didn't fight hate with hate. You stood taller by staying still." Marcus read it twice, then folded it carefully and placed it in a small wooden box where he kept memories from his service days. Tokens. Letters, things that reminded him of purpose. Meanwhile, the two officers, Daniels and Reed, faced the public storm. They received hate, threats, and criticism online, but Marcus refused to add to it. When a reporter asked if he thought they should lose their jobs, Marcus simply said, "No, let them learn." Punishment teaches fear. Education teaches change. That single line became a headline the next day. People shared it, quoted it, and turned it into art, posters, and short clips. The message spread faster than the original video itself. Soon, Marcus was invited to speak at a veterans leadership conference. He didn't plan to accept it first. He never saw himself as a speaker. But after thinking about it for days, he agreed. When he finally walked onto that stage, the crowd stood and clapped before he even said a word. He looked out at them, hundreds of faces from every background, every color, every story. He spoke slowly, clearly, his voice calm but firm. "When I served overseas, I learned how to control fear. But here at home, we must learn to control assumptions. What happened to me wasn't new, it was a reflection. We live in a world that reacts before it understands. That's not how peace works. Peace takes patience, and patience starts with us." The room was silent. Not a cough, not a whisper. When he finished, the applause lasted nearly 2 minutes straight. Some people cried. Some saluted. Some just sat there deep in thought. That night, clips of his speech went viral again. News outlets replayed his words. Hashtags flooded social media. The Calm Commander, Peace and Power, Marcus Hill. His story had grown far beyond what happened that morning. It had become a movement. Even the police department where the incident began launched a new training program named the Hill Initiative, focusing on de-escalation, respect, and communication. And they asked Marcus to help lead it. He didn't hesitate. "If it means fewer people getting hurt," he said, "then I'm in." When he came home that evening, Aunt Lydia was waiting for him on the porch with 2 slices of pie. "The whole world's talking about you, baby," she said proudly. Marcus smiled. "Let them talk," he said. "As long as they're learning." She handed him a plate. "You really think one man can change the world?" Marcus looked up at the night sky, stars scattered like quiet witnesses. "No," he said softly. "But one moment can remind the world it still has a heart." And that was the truth of it. The video that once showed pain had become a lesson in grace. The soldier who once fought wars with weapons now fought with patience, and somehow, that battle reached farther than any mission he had ever led.